Welcome to Stroke Warrior Radio's interview stories with what I like to call alternative therapies because what we're going to talk about isn't often thought about. But Stroke Warrior Radio is hoping to refuel or fuel resilience in people's stroke stories. Today we're joined by Jesse Ray Nan Smith, a brain injury survivor, mindfulness teacher, and creator of Mindful Concussion. Welcome, Jesse. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so honored to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate your time. Uh, I've researched you, I understand you empower survivors to cultivate calm and, let's say, clarity through mindfulness, community, and compassion. Let's explore how that has become somewhat of a movement in brain injury and stroke recovery.
Oh, absolutely.
Can you take us back to the beginning? What led you to your brain injury and how did your recovery journey start?
Yes, well, it was actually in February 2013 when I was driving down a busy road in Vancouver, where I live, Vancouver, Canada. And out of this, just a trigger warning, I'm going to describe my car accident. I was driving along, and this car started to come into the lane, and I got confused in that moment. But it turned out that she had run a stoplight, hadn't stopped at the stop sign. And the last thing I remember was slamming on my brakes, shutting my eyes, and hoping we wouldn't collide, but we did. I actually T-boned her, but it was her fault. And kind of in a twist of fate, the cops actually went to the hospital to give her a ticket for her
Oh my gosh.
miss driving. But she ended up fine, and I ended up with long-term, prolonged concussion symptoms. And so that's how it started. It wasn't that clear at first that they would be ongoing, but I actually got the whole sort of journey of healing happened quite quickly because I went to see my doctor the next day. I was sort of surprised that the paramedics didn't send me to the hospital. They sent her to the hospital and not me. But I
Well,
knew something was wrong, and I went to the hospital. And sorry, my doctor, she diagnosed, whiplash, brain injury, and then she gave me a piece of paper that said, if you get worse, contact the local rehab center, which I later did.
okay. What were some of the most unexpected or difficult symptoms you faced post-injury?
Mm-hmm. Well, it all really started on about day 5. So after the accident, I felt out of it, and I actually had a lot of pain from the impact of my constriction of my knee, my legs, and
Yeah.
it seemed almost in some ways that the car was in worse shape than I was.
Yeah.
But then it progressively got worse, and this can happen. You can have a period where you don't feel great, but your symptoms haven't kicked in quite as much. And this is what happened to me. On day 5, I was so much worse. My headache was debilitating. And so I took that piece of paper that my doctor had given that said, if you're worse, call the rehab center in Vancouver. And I took that piece of paper, and it was like this. I was like literally shaking like this. I thought I was in a movie or something. I couldn't see the number. I called, and I got this recording, and they said, oh, if you're worse, call 911. So I did. And I ended up going to emergency then with my dad. And the doctor said, yep, you've got a concussion. It's gonna be, this is now go back and get more support from the rehab center, which I did. I went to GF Strong very early on, which sometimes people don't get in for a while, but they have an early response concussion program, and they were wonderful. They taught me about how to pace my symptoms, and anyway, I'm going ahead. What you wanted to know was the actual symptoms. So that the first was the headaches, and I had
Right.
that every day for 24 hours a day for a month, and then almost every day for 6 months. And then over time, that's subsided. But the other 3 main symptoms that were challenging were extreme sensitivity to noise and sound and light, as well as cognitive fatigue, just getting very too tired doing activities too much. And lastly, easily stressed, so easily dysregulated nervous system and inability to manage stressors that had been minor that became much more.
Yeah, it's interesting to me after my stroke. They call it a brain attack. And although yours was a traumatic brain injury, mine was a stroke, they're very similar. And you get those brain neurons get all messed up. You start losing memories and all kinds of different things. It's really shocking how the brain addresses so many things. How did you, or when did you begin to realize that your healing needed, or I should ask first, how long were you in rehab? How long did that go?
Well, it connected with that rehab center, which was as an outpatient. First in their early concussion response program, which was working, which was really not that. It was more like they sent me information and I talked a little bit on the phone, but it wasn't that extent. It was still very useful information, but it wasn't until later that I joined their more extensive program, which I'm forgetting the name of it right now, but it was basically very intensive. It was a number of months, and I worked with a psychologist and an occupational therapist. And they were the ones that originally, even in that very first moments, recommended mindfulness for brain injury. And I'm so grateful that they did that because I got on the mindful path very, very early on. And as I can describe later, I just wish that they would have done so with a warning label. So I found many mindfulness practices were so regulating to my nervous system, helped me manage stress, helped me manage my exhausted brain, helped me manage my fears of my symptoms and my situation. But there were other practices that were the opposite. They put me into more fear, more panic, and in fact, at times I was having panic attacks and dissociation. It was way too overwhelming and I just shut down. And so that's really why I wanted to build Mindful Concussion, was so that other survivors could take advantage of the power of mindfulness without falling prey to these perils, which had really been detrimental for me. And I don't think that if I hadn't really discovered the powers first, I might have just given up and never benefited from it.
Well, there's so many misconceptions about this concept of mindfulness. What is mindfulness?
Well, it's a complex term and many people have different definitions, but the basic idea is that when we're not mindful, whether we have some type of a brain condition or not, we tend to spend a lot of our time lost in thought. We tend to be lost in the past, where we're regretting the past, or we're lost in thought about the future, worries about the future. This is common to everyone, or most everyone. And when you have something like a trauma mixed with a serious health condition like brain injury, stroke, suddenly your regrets and your worries become very intense. It's no longer kind of everyday issues, it's a lot. And so really the state that we come to mindfulness practice is very different from other people. But the basic idea of the power of mindfulness is that we can begin to learn how to stop this time travel. We bring our attention from the past, from the future, right here to this moment. And usually this moment is not nearly as difficult as those past regrets and future worries. This moment, oh, wow, okay, I might have a headache, I might be foggy brained, I might be feeling a bit forgetful, whatever the symptom is, oftentimes it's our worries about how we'll manage it later that's worse than actually the present moment. So that's one benefit. It can also help to give our brain, our attention, a place to land. So in mindfulness, there's an anchor of attention. It's often the breath because it's there 24 hours a day, but it doesn't need to be. It could be the taste of chocolate, the taste of your tea, the sight of the beautiful clouds flowing by, the feeling of relaxing into yoga. Like there's many different ways that we can practice mindfulness, but the basic similarity is we bring our attention to the present. And this itself can be very, very healing or help with our symptoms, to just stop worrying about what's going on and land right here. There's like a quieting that can happen where we stop the rumination, the worry, the fears, getting lost in loops about that. So that's the basic first step, is to bring our attention to the present moment. And it's actually not that easy to do that. Because really easily we get lost in the past and future again. This is normal. It happens to everyone. The practice is, oh, look, I've gotten lost. I'm going to bring myself back to the present, to my anchor. And this can calm your nervous system. And it also allows you, we pay attention to what's happening around us on the outside, as well as what's happening on the inside. And therefore it gives us information. Oh, what do I need now? Right? Like what, well, maybe instead of being so reactive, that's an automatic, oh no, I'm angry, I'm going to shout at my spouse. Instead, there's like a pause, and mindfulness gives us a pause so that we can actually reflect and make a wise choice about the action we want to do. So instead of like, I'm feeling horrible, I think I'll scroll on my phone for an hour, we actually pause and go, oh, you know what? Maybe a walk in nature will serve me more, right? It's about agency, self-reflection, like having the dial on our life, having the dial of what we do and what we don't do, rather than being so automatic. I don't know, is that making any sense?
Yes, it does. It does to me. But what I'd like to explore a little bit more is what was the moment that clicked that you realized that your healing needed more than conventional therapy? And how does mindfulness apply to those other therapies, traditional
Mm-hmm.
therapies?
Yeah, well, like I say, my journey was a little bit different because I was introduced to mindfulness right at the same time as the other therapies. So I was doing psychology, I was doing, cognitive behavioral therapy. I was seeing an occupational therapist where I was learning how to pace, so important. I was learning how to, let my symptoms be my guide so that I wasn't pushing over into overwhelm, but noticing when I was starting to have my symptoms. All of that work, though, Ralph, is really served by mindfulness. I mean, you can't actually notice if you can't actually sort of pace your day properly unless you've actually have enough mindfulness on board to notice when you're not pacing, right?
Okay.
You can It's
Okay.
very difficult to notice, oh, let your symptoms be your guide, if you're not even listening to when your symptoms begin. So it was really helpful for me to begin to notice, oh, I'm beginning to have a headache, or I'm beginning to have cognitive fatigue. It's like the sooner we catch it, the better. So I'm a bit different because I had those teachings together, whereas some other people might go on this route with a bunch of, very traditional practices and then later bring on in the mindfulness. To me, they were introduced at the same time. But the different thing for me was that, as I said, some of the practices were really helpful, but some of them also hindered and really did the opposite of what they were intended to do. And that's really why I realized I needed to have a different approach.
And forgive me if I'm oversimplifying it or not making sense, but our motto is catch the wave, warriors achieving victories every day. Is part of that mindfulness you're talking about, recognizing in your recovery that you do have those small victories that can lead up to the bigger ones?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It is a long journey, I think, for anybody that has had changes to their brain. There's some people that have a mild concussion and they recover quickly. That does happen, but what we're talking about here is another category of people who go on to have symptoms for months and years and ongoing. And in that, it really is so important to notice those moments when we feel that agency in our life. I think that's one thing that's really helped me with mindfulness, is that I feel like if I'm not feeling good, right? If I'm feeling too tired, my brain has been pushing too much, I know what to do. I know what I can turn to. I know that if I go for a walk, or if I take a bath, or if I do some yoga, or if I talk to a friend, like I know what I need to at least make myself feel a little bit better. I may not get to 100% in that moment, but that agency is so important because I've seen survivors, on Facebook groups, and they're just screaming with their fingers. They're
Yeah.
so unable to find any respite or any support. And I'm here to say that I just want to take them all by the hand and say, please, please, please come with me. There is another way that really is a beautiful guide at our side, is our mindfulness practice.
It sounds to me too like it's a form of self-advocacy, whereas we're not told as much in the beginning of our recoveries, how hard it's going to be, how long it's going to be, all those things. And there's the concept of paying attention to what's happening and what you need to do to make it happen, right? Am I on the same page?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is tricky because everybody and every body is different, right? And so when you go see a medical professional, they can have some clues as to what your journey might be. But for all of us, our journey to recovery, or our journey to healing, or a journey to being better able to manage our actual lived experience, varies. And I know that it was a pivotal moment for me in my journey when I was about 2.5 years after my accident. And I went to go see a neurologist. And he said, Jesse, you know that woman who was here before you? She's at year 4, and she's still trying to live her old life. She's killing herself, doing too much, overstretching all the time, miserable. And he just looked me in the eye and he said, Jesse, you need to find a level of activity that you can do and live well. And it really was a breakthrough. It was a painful moment. I left that office and I felt my world fall away. I thought, oh my God, am I going to be like this forever? Like, I really didn't realize that there was a possibility that I wouldn't fully recover. At that point, I didn't really know about prolonged symptoms. I don't know how I'd gone that far without hearing about that, but I just had been under the assumption that I would fully recover. But it was actually freeing. In that moment, I gave up some of my work. I still work half time, but at that time I'd been working about 3/4 time. And the difference of going from 3/4 to half time was huge. Suddenly I had many hours a day where I could devote to my self-care, where my brain wasn't as exhausted at the end of my workday. And that it was very hard emotionally and financially to do that, but it made all the difference. Suddenly I was just being realistic about what I could and couldn't do. And it is that moment of mindfulness allows us the opportunity to see things as they truly are, not how we wish they were or we fear they might be, or within, caught up in a trigger from the past. We just can break through the veil and actually see, oh, look at this. Right now, this is how I am. And right now, he said to figure out what a right level was. And this took me a little bit, but I figured out that about half-time work was what worked for me.
Again, it's with the cognitive issues for me, I had difficulty recognizing those levels, so I guess I had fortunately gotten some mindfulness training earlier before my stroke, but I think that's what helped my recovery. That it caused me to pay attention to the recovery process and then become captain of my own team. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I found out I can fire my therapist. I had started interviewing therapists and going out and visiting their locations before I decided on who I was going to use. So I think that was one of the things that helped me as well.
I would just say along the same lines, I did similar with teachers, right? So I remember, just kind of ignoring what some of the mindfulness teachers were offering because it was too much for me. So not necessarily firing them, but basically saying, no, I'm not doing that. I'm doing this instead. And yeah, it
Yeah.
takes a lot of kind of chutzpah to constantly advocate for ourselves and our needs. When we have invisible disabilities, people used to, I had hurt my knee in the car accident, and they used to see my knee brace, which my knee's okay now, more or less, but and they'd be so worried about my knee. And I said, no, my knee's gonna be fine. It's my brain.
Okay. I'm curious, really curious about your concept. What inspired your creation of the mindful concussion? Was there a pivotal moment that sparked it for you?
Yeah, well, there's a few. So, at first I was told to take up mindfulness, but I really didn't have at that moment the capacity to take a course or do anything, read a book. It was very, very early on after my accident. I couldn't do much of that. But I actually had been doing yoga for a number of years. So went back to yoga. I did gentle yoga. I had heard a little bit about, nature practice. So I would just walk in my neighborhood and enjoy the flowers. And I also saw on a brain injury website this thing about doing long, slow, deep breathing, where you take a in breath and then your exhale is longer than the inhale. And I do that every day, just taking these long, slow, deep breaths. And so for several months, this just gentle yoga with the walks in nature and really allowing my attention to land on enjoying the beauty of nature instead of getting lost in my worries. And these long, slow, deep breaths. I felt agency, like, oh, I know what to do to feel better, right? And then what happened is I went to my first formal mindfulness meditation course, retreat. And the teacher said, okay, now pay attention to your breath. And then he said, but don't change it. And I thought, what do you mean don't change it? If I don't change it, it's just very short and shallow. This is stressful. I want to change it. I want to make it long, deep inhales, long exhales. For me, changing my breath was super important, but they didn't want me to do that. And so right away, on my very first moment, I'm already, defying the teacher. That I think was really the beginning of the mindful concussion approach. Was right then I said, no, I'm not doing that. I'm doing what I need. And really, the other thing that they said was, now we're going to go for a mindful walk. Pay attention to your feet walking and the feeling of your feet walking. And I thought, there's so much beauty out here. I live in British Columbia, and I much better to focus on the beauty around me. And I also know now that I actually was gravitating to anchors of attention that were more outside my body because my body was more scary. And so I just didn't do what he said. And I know now that what I was doing was turning to practices that were regulating to my nervous system. That was the key for me. I didn't have the language then, but I was turning to mindfulness practices that were regulating, that would down, for me, I mostly felt anxiety, so I needed to down regulate. Other people sometimes get really numb and they need practices that will energize them more, like a fast walk or a run. So that was the first step. And then the next one was sometime later, I took a course, the mindfulness-based stress reduction course, which is a very famous 8-week course by John Kabat-Zinn. Amazing, research on it. It's been all over the world, and I was encouraged to take it. And in the first class, they had us lie down on the floor in the dark. I showed up, I'm already a mess, right? I've come from work, I take the bus, it's a loud bus. I'm already done, like I shouldn't have even been there, but I'm here to do this thing. They lie us down and they ask us to do a body scan. Well, those of us who with neurological changes, our autonomic nervous system is on the fritz, where we so easily become dysregulated. We go into fight, flight, or freeze very quickly. Our body detects danger and it's trying to protect us by fighting, freezing, and fleeing. And so I call this MDNS, mindfulness for dysregulated nervous systems. And both stroke and TBI survivors are pretty darn familiar with that.
Yeah.
So, so there I was in this class, twitching and oh my God. So I go home to do the homework, and similarly, I'm listening to the recording, and they're saying, now pay intimate attention for 45 minutes to my body, inside all of the emotions and physical sensations. And I was like, are you kidding? So I would, basically the recording would end and I would come to and go, what happened? Where did I go? Like I missed that. I didn't go to sleep. And I realized later that my body protected me. The whole thing was way too overwhelming. So my body went
Wow.
into freeze and I just went into dissociation and blocked it out. So these things are happening, and then I'll just say two more things that were these pivotal moments that brought me to the mindful concussion approach. And that is but at the same time, I was learning the power of being with my symptoms, right? So there was one morning when I woke up, I didn't feel good. I called it concussy, like my brain was foggy. I was tired. I felt kind of nauseous. And I was like, but why? It's the morning. Usually I feel good in the morning. And I realized I'd kind of overdone it the day before. So I was feeling sorry for myself. And
Yeah,
then in
exactly.
that moment, I heard the voice of the psychologist at the rehab center. And he said, Jesse, bring the mindfulness to to the hard moments, right? And so I just thought, okay, I'm going to let myself feel this concussion feelings. Instead of fighting them, pushing them away, I'm going to just let go of that fight and allow myself to feel it. And that was a pivotal moment in my whole journey because in that moment, letting go of the fight, letting go of trying not to feel my symptoms, I felt this dissipation. I felt this freedom. Like, oh, it's just a headache. It's just some nausea. It's not something I need to fight. My body let go of fight, flight, and freeze, and it just landed in feeling my symptoms. And in that, I realized, oh, they're not so bad. It's my fear of them that's way worse than the thing itself. And I kind of had that moment where I realized, yeah, I don't feel great right now, but it's not going to last. It's like the impermanence of it. Okay, I may have ongoing symptoms, but they're not the same all day long. And I can now go and have a walk and feel better. So that was a moment that was important as well. But then what would happen is I started to do that. I started to try to do that every morning in my mindfulness practice. So I would let go and allow myself to feel. And instead of feeling that freedom and that dissipation, sometimes I would feel an intensification, like letting myself feel. It just got worse and worse and worse. And I ended up having panic attacks in the middle of mindfulness practice. And that was terrifying.
Yeah, bet.
So just soon to wrap this up, but just to say that I realized that I could notice when I was beginning to dissociate, when I was beginning to get panicked, and then stop and pivot away. But I had to use mindfulness to be very aware of my body so that I could notice when that was happening and continue to benefit from the powers of mindfulness. And so one day I said to my now ex-husband, he was washing dishes, and I said, you know what? I think I want to share this with other people. I think I'm onto something really important here. And so maybe when I retire, I'll do that. And I remember him so clearly. He just whipped around and looked at me and he said, Jesse, no, you need to do this now, not when you retire.
Cool.
So
Very
that was
cool.
kind of the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious, and it's not in our outline, but tell me how, and maybe in your clients or in yourself, tell me what that did to your physical recovery. Does it affect the physical and psychological, or is it, I'm not saying it very well.
No, I
What's the
think,
correlation?
yeah. So in In Buddhism, there's the idea of the first and second dart. So mindfulness is not taught usually from a Buddhist perspective, but comes from the Buddhist philosophy.
Okay.
So the idea is we have our first problem. Let's call it um, forgetfulness, right? That's just one symptom that you might have, right? The forgetfulness is what it is, right? But what happens next is we add a second dart or a third or a fourth. We add on top of the physical symptom, we add on physical constriction to ourselves, like, oh, I don't want to feel that. We add emotions like fear, I don't want to feel this. We add shame, we add doubt, we add all kinds of other things that are just not needed. What we have here is some forgetfulness. And we add on a whole bunch of other things. And all these other things that we add can actually lead to a lot of physical problems, right? If you're constantly tight and constantly in a panic and constantly worried, it's going to have longer term consequences. So with the mindful approach, we actually try to stop those second darts. We catch them. We're like, no, I'm not that. This is no need to be ashamed. This is natural. No need to feel judged. No need to add a physical constriction. Let's just be with the sensation itself. And in being forgetful, the feelings about it. Now, in the mindful concussion approach, no, I should say in a traditional mindfulness approach, they would encourage you to feel it all immediately, just like feel how it feels in your body. And the idea in traditional mindfulness is that we're all disembodied, and therefore we just need to add embodiment. But the truth is, many of us survivors are over embodied. We are hyper attention to our body. We're constantly paying attention to every little twinge of pain, or every time we forget something, oh no, I'm going to have Alzheimer's. It just goes on and on. So the mindful concussion approach is much more gentle. It is like, yes, it is helpful to learn to be with our difficulties, but the first step is actually to support our nervous system, to give us our self-regulation skills so that we can actually calm ourselves down and have the clarity to see, oh, it's okay. It's just a headache. I just feel a little nausea. It's not a big problem. I can handle that. So
Which,
was that helping answer your question?
yeah, so another, which also, and what I'm reading is, which also leads to doing the physical work without all those darts you're talking about. So you get to that mindful spot, you can do the physio, you can do the occupational, you can do the speech.
Absolutely. No, this is essential. If we
Yeah,
go to see the practitioners who help us, the speech pathologists, the physios, you name it, all the people that we see that we're so grateful, the professionals who help us.
amen.
When we arrive in that room in a state of a dysregulated nervous system, it is nearly impossible to learn. So if we're in fight, flight, and freeze, which is kind of angry, anxious, afraid, or if we're more numbed down in fogginess, depression, that type of thing, either hyper aroused or hypo aroused nervous system. In these states where we're in fight or flight up top or freeze down below, our body has taken over to protect us. It's a beautiful thing. When we're in true danger, we need that. If we're going to be actually hit by a car, we need to jump back quickly. And our brain is taking care of us, our body is protecting us. It's really important that we do that. The problem with our chronic conditions is that our body thinks our conditions are a threat, but they're not. So we need to actually turn that off and say, hey, you don't need to launch a fight response here. It's just, put whatever symptoms you want in there, right? So
Just an exercise. Yeah,
yeah, when we get when we are out of that, when we're sort of like either in hyper or hypo nervous system arousal, our survival brain has taken over, as it should when we're in an actual threat. And in that state, our thinking brain, our learning brain is nowhere to be found. We're acting automatically. This is our autonomic systems protecting us from a danger that we're perceiving, right? But until we perceive that we're safe, and until those things step back and stop fighting, fleeing, or freezing, it's going to be super hard to learn. And I'm sure we can all remember that. We show up in the office and the physiotherapist says, okay, now do 10 of those. And you're like, what did they say? I can't remember. You're too distracted by anxiety to even figure out what they're saying. So these practices are essential to do before you go, so that you can arrive to your specialist in a state of calm clarity. And from there, you'll be much more likely to take it in and learn.
It's a more physical acceptance of what you're doing in your visit.
Yeah,
That's
it's
kind
like
of cool. I like
about
the way that.
turning off the stress hormones, turning them off so that you just tell your body, well, you don't, the problem honestly is that you can't tell your body doesn't listen that way. It learns through experience. And one of the modalities that's been such an important part of my journey is mindful self-compassion, which is when we hold our scared parts, when we hold our angry parts, when we hold our shut down parts with love, and we say, hey, this is really hard. We don't try to talk them out of what they're feeling. We love them up, like a parent holds their frightened child. And in doing that, then they calm down because they're like, oh yeah, this is hard, and thank you for noticing. And you can feel your whole energy come down, or maybe if you need more energy, it comes up. And then you can walk into that office and say, hey, bring it on. I'm ready to do the really hard work. Because if you're doing in particular, some physical or some type of any type of therapy is hard. It's stretching, it's learning. Yeah.
Tell us about your 10-week mindfulness, or 8-week, I'm sorry, 8-week mindfulness for brain injury course. What can people expect from that? And what is it?
Yeah, so once I realized that I wanted to share what I'd learned with other people, I decided to get qualified as a mindfulness teacher. And I actually did take the mindfulness-based stress reduction teacher training because it's excellent training. The whole program's wonderful. The mentors are fantastic. And so I did that through the University of California Center for Mindfulness. But I told my mentor right from the beginning, I actually want to, create something a little bit different. It is very inspired by that course, but there's so many things that I modify and change from it. They're really very different. Um, so this course starts out with the idea that the core initial goal is nervous system regulation, that we need to learn to self-regulate. And so that's the core beginning. Whereas traditional mindfulness goes right pretty much quickly to much more advanced practices, right? And they don't really even talk about nervous system regulation as a goal. So the goal is bring your attention to the present, find some pleasant anchors, and practice being present so that if you notice you're going back to worry or regret, then you can come back. And we practice with relatively pleasant anchors of attention. So mindful eating. On my current blog, there's a whole thing on how to do mindful chocolate eating. It's a lot more fun than the quick throw it down your throat and you don't even notice it.
I
We do
need I need
mindfulness.
that one.
We do mindfulness in nature. We do joy practice and gratitude practice and slow yoga and long, slow, deep breathing. And we do mindful self-compassion practices. All of these things help us bring our attention to the present so that we can start to get better at being in the present moment. And when we do so, we're consciously choosing to do so with pleasant anchors. because it's really hard to learn to be present if every time we come to the present, what we find is pain or panic.
Right.
And with any type of brain injury, stroke, all the whole range of people who are easily dysregulated, we have a lot of physical pain, emotional pain, and emotional dysregulation that if we stop and just pay attention, pretty much right away, we're going to find something difficult. And how do we learn this come back to the present moment if every time we come back, it's really hard? So in the initial stages of my 8-week course, we actually purposefully practice taking our attention off our symptoms, off our worries. It's a bit controversial because some mindfulness teachers will say, oh, you just have to notice whatever's happening. I say, no, we need more support first. We need to start gentle with these pleasant anchors. And the pleasant is subjective because I like mindful eating, but someone who experiences tremendous nausea might prefer mindful tea sipping. Everybody's different. Some people love the nature practice. Some people prefer the yoga practice. So we figure out it's like basically in this 8-week course, your body is the beaker in a big experiment where you figure out what works for you, because we know every survivor is different. And so the weeks go on, we learn that, we learn about stress reaction cycle and stress response. How do we meet what's happening in the present moment and learn to be more responsive to it rather than reactive? How can we choose our actions skillfully rather than reacting quickly? Like, oh no, I sent that email. I wish I hadn't sent that email. But if we take that mindful pause, then we're not hitting send. We're actually choosing to wait. Think about it. Maybe do it tomorrow.
That
So
makes sense.
yeah, that's the course as we go through learning a bunch of different skills. Um, and then eventually at the very end, then we begin to introduce this idea of getting comfortable with the uncomfortable of our symptoms. But we do it very thoughtfully. We do it by saying, okay, Ralph, you choose what symptom you feel comfortable feeling today. And you have your dial on how much you can titrate. You can put a toe in, dip your toe out if it starts to feel too much. And we kind of acclimatize ourselves so that bit by bit by bit, we realize, you know what? We can handle our symptoms. It's our fear of them that is often half the battle. And that's those second darts, right? So that's the
Yeah.
approach. So that at the very end, the idea is at some point, everyone will be able to do any mindfulness practice out there. But my strong feeling is that people with easily dysregulated nervous systems need to have a different way to learn in the beginning.
One of the things that happened to me in 2001 is I had ventricular tachycardia, and I died on the table 3 times one night. So afterwards, one of the things that's brought me back is because where we were living in Flagstaff, Arizona, um, is a nature um, component. Your monthly circle up gatherings, what's the power behind nature and peer connection and recovery?
Yeah, well, definitely. I've found that in all of the things that I do, whether it's a course or a workshop or that I do every other month, I have a free Zoom circle up where we come together and learn mindfulness. And being in community is so important. That because it's easy, especially because oftentimes we do need to spend uh, less time in social situations. Oftentimes being in crowds starts to feel overwhelming. And so we actually can get more isolated. And so coming together in community with people who understand us, people who aren't going to ask you, why do you want the music turned down? Or why do you want the lights turned down? Or what, why do you need more time to do this thing? What's wrong with you? No, nobody's going to say that, because even though we're all different, we get each other, right? To
Right.
some extent. And so having that, being allowed to be yourself. And for me, I know that my brain injury students just love being taught by someone who gets it. Some of them have had some mindfulness training before from people that are lovely and and caring, but they just don't understand it. So it is really something different to be with someone who understands. I don't know stroke as well, but I do know that many of the conditions are similar, and so much of the teaching would be helpful. And nature definitely is it's available all the time, right? It's out there, whether it's raindrops on your umbrella or sun on your skin. All of the difficulties in life can be out there, but nature is always there to hold us and to one of the ways. So traditional mindfulness and nature practices often focus on noticing nature or noticing. In fact, that's one of the critiques I have for brain injury, the mindfulness practices that always ask you to notice what you're feeling, notice what you see, notice. Well, for a tired brain, that level of noticing is exhausting. I just found it too much. So I turn instead, when I go to a nature practice, my anchor of attention is savoring beauty. I just look out and I just enjoy the flowers, the trees, the sky, the moon, the sun, the water. And when you savor it, you use your heart. And that's a lot easier on a brain injury than like noticing it. You notice the green, that's your brain. You love the green, that's your heart. And so
Well,
that practice has been really, really helpful to me. And of course, there's lots of science behind the benefits of being in nature. And the key, though, is to turn off your phone, don't listen to a podcast, don't get thinking. If you notice you start to ruminate about a problem, bring your attention back to where you are. You can use the five senses, the sights, the sounds, the smells. You can touch things, maybe some tasting, depending what's available.
yeah,
And I found initially, I had one mindfulness teacher who I adore. Mark Coleman does fantastic work about mindfulness in nature, but a lot of his recordings were about sound and like, listen to the nice bird sounds. And I'm like, this is so loud. I couldn't really do the sound part as much then. So we modify. And really, I ended up working with a wonderful teacher called David Treleaven, who wrote the book Trauma Sensitive Mindfulness. And when I first got connected to his community, I learned something. Before I met him, I thought that I was kind of cheating all the time by doing things differently and defying the teacher. And I knew I needed to do it, but I still felt a bit guilty, like, oh, I'm doing it wrong. But when I met David, he said, oh no, it's just a modification. It's just a modification because you're different. You need some special support. And I felt so great then. I'm like, oh, I'm not cheating. I'm just modifying to meet my needs and meet the needs of my students. So I ended up getting very involved in his teaching, and eventually he took me on as a mentee in this mentorship program he did. And on our first meeting on Zoom, he looked me right in the eye and he said, Jesse, do you want to write? And I said, yeah. And so he encouraged me to write. And I am currently writing a book called The Power and Perils of Mindfulness for Brain Injury. David is writing the foreword, and it's hard. It's hard to write with brain injury, but it's a beautiful project.
you often speak about gentle, inclusive healing. What does that mean for people with invisible disabilities?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, well, as I said, my experience of traditional mindfulness was very like, let's do it all today, right? Let's sit there and feel all of our emotions and all of our physical sensations, and also let's not judge them. And in addition, let's get comfortable with them. There was like all these things that were so much. To me, it felt like all at once. Really, there wasn't, a lot of time to learn each step. So for us, oftentimes multitasking is really difficult, especially if we're being asked to pay attention to things that can be overwhelming, physically and emotionally overwhelming. So the mindful concussion approach we don't multitask. We do one at a time. We start with attentional control, learning how to bring our attention to the present. We focus on pleasant anchors. We focus on self regulation. We focus on learning, oh, what are the signs that I'm beginning to feel my symptoms? What are the signs that I'm beginning to have nervous system dysregulation, like a stress reaction, fight, flight, or freeze? Sweaty palms, headache, tight muscles. So we begin to notice, oh, look at that. I might be having a stress reaction. I can actually pivot and resource myself. And then we practice a whole bunch of different resourcing practices: yoga, nature, joy, mindful self-compassion, eating, sipping tea. Uh, some people like it faster. They need to go for a run, or, everybody's different. And some people go knitting or gardening or bowling, like whatever it is that will calm you down. It's about having that agency. And when I was first learning the mindful based stress reduction program, and then I did the teacher program, they actually wouldn't let me teach resourcing. The idea that from that program is, if you pay attention and you're mindful, you will automatically know what to do. And for, I think, people with healthy nervous systems, that's true. They stop,
Yeah.
they ponder, they look, they can see, oh, I could do this instead. But when you have a brain injury and you're so discombobulated and so often in fear and panic, you can't think clearly to go, oh, instead of drinking this alcohol, maybe I should go and go sit and have some meditation instead, right? It doesn't even occur to you, right? So my strong feeling is that in those steps that I mentioned, that one of them is to give a lot of choices of what might regulate you. And then you practice and you notice what works for me. Some people love gratitude practice. I have a gratitude box. I write down one thing I'm grateful for from yesterday every day. Other people be like, no, I don't like that. I prefer this chocolate eating. Let's do more of that. So it's a big experiment.
We're kind of running out of time and we still haven't covered a whole lot. So let's wrap it up with a little bit of get to know you, if that's all right. Quick fire questions. What's your favorite grounding practice?
I notice my muscles are tense and I unclench. And
Ah,
then take a deep breath and a long exhale.
something that brings you joy right now.
I'm on a beautiful island just near Vancouver called Bowen Island, where I have a week to just focus on writing my book, and I'm very happy to be doing that.
Very cool. One word that describes your recovery journey.
Tenacity.
That's a good one. I haven't heard that one yet. Nature or music, your go-to emotional reset.
Nature, 100%. Music is still can be dysregulating to me, especially if it's in the background. Although, tip for you folks, that if I listen to music in my earbuds, then I find it much easier to enjoy.
Oh, nice. Looking back, well, how do people get a hold of you? Are you willing to take inquiries? What's
Yeah,
your socials, website, whatever?
yeah. So my website is mindfulconcussion.ca. And on there, you can find blogs, you can sign up for my newsletter, you can see my offerings. And I haven't really had anybody with a stroke in my program yet, but I'm interested in seeing if it would feel like a good fit. I also would be very open to doing something specific for stroke if there was a community that would like to bring me on for that. I do have my 8-week course, but I'm not teaching it right now because I'm focused on writing my book. But I am doing social media. So I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook. I'm trying to decide whether I should do TikTok or Instagram. If anybody has any ideas of which would be better for this community, I'd love to know. But I'm doing more social media, and I'm starting a campaign in the fall called a phrase from a page, where I'm going to talk about a phrase from my draft book. And I really invite people's comments to help me make the book better.
Oh, very cool. All right. I want to thank you. Please hang around afterwards. And hopefully we can do this again and finish the rest of the things we wanted to talk about.
I'd be happy to.
Thanks.